Disorganized play, and they called it the best part of my day. Yeah, they called it disorganized play. We all tuned in to find out what Tom was gonna say. Hey! I think I just scared the dog, everybody. The dog does not like my musical stylings. Well, he's the only one, so you're all gamers of refined taste, so I'm glad to know that you all enjoyed that delightful... Now the dog's whining. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Disorganized Play. It is our penultimate session of Storm King's Thunder. Please pause for a moment while I tweet out the heads up so that other people will come and join us. Shall we? All right. I want to thank everyone in the chat, like Texas Devin and James V, and I think I saw Live to Game in the chat too, for joining us this weekend for our 24-hour spring marathon. That was juicy. Where's my tweet? Gotta thread those tweets, guys. So yeah, maybe the cone is making the music better for the dog. I can only imagine that's the case. Here we go. That's the tweet I want to tweet. Normally I do this before I start. I'm sorry. I'm live, not like. With. Boy, I know this is fascinating streaming. I apologize. Today, shortcuts to success. You're fine. Dog is fussing because he's got a cone on. Oh, how slow can I type? Come on. You're fine. There we go. I did it. All right. Thank you for your patience. You're fine. All right, everybody. Hey, RevloBot is back online. All right. I'm sorry for that momentary disruption there. All right. So let's talk about our agenda for today. Like I said, it's the penultimate session. We got 2 sessions left. Tomorrow is one of the 2. So let's take a brief recap of what happened last session and where we are at in the storyline. I'm going to talk about a couple things. We're going to talk shortcuts to success. We're going to talk about our cast of characters. And I'm going to talk about the Saving Throw Show Marathon, a little paranoia. So what I learned this weekend running Paranoia, which was interesting. And I had a lot of fun. So if you guys have not tuned in for that, go to the channel, check out the highlight vids. It's all divided up. Both Fiasco and Paranoia were super fun from my perspective, both as a GM and a player. So get into it. The dog is making a tentative move to maybe go lay down. Go lay down. Go on. Go lay down. All right. So recap of the recap. Where are we at with the game? Last session, I was all excited because I had a little bit of extra time. I added a session into our calendar. I was like, we got plenty of time to kind of like unspool some of the plot threads. let the players really make some discoveries, and guess what they did not do? They did not make some discoveries. So we picked up in the floating cloud giant castle, and we picked right up where we left off, which might have been kind of a mistake. But there was some exciting stuff that they had to, the castle was starting to drop, and they had to stabilize it, and Crisaro had done some sabotage to it, so that was one of the reasons that it was dropping. He'd also set his office on fire to kind of cover up the evidence of what he had been involved in, so they had to put that out. And then, of course, they did some looting of the bodies and whatnot. You can go back to our highlight vids and catch that episode of the recap from Thursday, if you are so inclined. But the overall session, in terms of what happened, was it really turned into a dungeon crawl more than an exploration. They did a little bit of clue finding, but they found this secret giant-sized dungeon lair. I described the castle as being like normal-sized for the most part, and then they discovered the secret door that led to this giant-sized area inside the castle. And within that, there was a dungeon level that was giant-sized. And so the session really turned into let's explore the dungeon kind of session, where they set off some traps and they found some stuff, and they potentially found a few clues, but not as many clues as I wanted them to dig up. But honestly, the session was sort of all over the place. There's a few people who were actively looking for what was going on, and then there were, I would say about half the party was like, whatever, let's look for stuff. I just want money. I don't really care about the plot. It's like, okay, guys, well, let's just find some money then. So that was the bulk of the session, and at the very end, we sort of squeezed in the final room that they ended up getting to. They did release Felgalos, the copper bronze dragon, whatever he is. Anyway, they released him. He was very angry about being held prisoner by Sansuri, Countess Sansuri, right? The cloud giant, who did not get away. So that's the buzz there. They did find one person who could potentially feed them some clues, and they found a couple of the clues. They found I didn't print it off, but it's in your Dropbox folder. They found an encoded set of scrolls that were letters to Lord Dryland, and that explained that there was a thing called the Kraken Society, and explained that there was, that the Kraken Society was involved in both the murder of Queen Neri and the abduction of King Hecaton, but there was no information about where he was located. It also implicated Marcus Gove, which is an NPC that I made up in terms of spying on the party and being part of the he was part of the conspiracy, part of the Kraken Society. Well, yeah, he's part of the Kraken Society, part of the conspiracy, right? So they did get some information, but mostly it turned out to be a dungeon crawl where they're trying not to set off traps on each other, and we got into a big fight with a couple of invisible stalkers, so that was a little tricky. And then they released the dragon, and they saved the castle, and they kind of landed the castle in a field about 10 miles outside of Yartar. And then at that point, we literally had 10 minutes left, and the Water Baron of Yartar drags them all into a room and gives them a talk this was a massive inside job that was an attempt to take out the Lord's Alliance. We're going to resurrect as many of these guys as possible, but before we do that, we want you to know that officially, according to, we've debriefed everyone who was involved in this incident, and officially you guys are dead. So we recommend you forge new identities and make the most of what little time you have, because if anybody starts scrying for you, this story is not going to hold water. But if you want to, if you want to take advantage of the situation, have at it. So that was sort of the very end. They got some information that Marcus Gove said something along the lines of, you know, Lord Dryland, I look forward to sharing a warm glass of mead with you at the Golden Goat. You know, the winter's cold here on deck up north in the spine of the world. I don't, you know, I'd love to be sailing set for sunnier realms or whatever. The players immediately like glommed onto this and felt like this was their hot lead. Okay, great. Let's find Lord Dryland. He clearly escaped, and he's known to hang out at this place called the Golden Goat. So that's in Waterdeep. Let's go there. Now, that was the session. I didn't get into too much into the hairy details, but hey, that was maybe the quickest, the quickest recap of the recap I have ever done. Yeah, warm glass of mead. Why not? Why not a warm glass of mead? Heat it up. Glug, glug, glug. You know, when you're cold, enjoy. Don't expect people in the fantasy world to make logical choices. So that's the quick recap of the recap. Very good. So let's talk about where we are at. We have 2 sessions left. The party needs to locate King Hecaton. The party needs to find him, and then assuming that they find him and or rescue him or whatever happens there. And I don't think, like, my personal reading of the adventure, so like it sort of gives them like a, it feels like a 70% chance of like, they'll probably find him, and hopefully they'll, you know, fight off the Kraken and the crew of the ship and right? I'm honestly like not huge. I haven't bought into that storyline or that particular outcome very heavily. I don't think the players need King Hecaton to help them succeed. And I think it's actually more interesting if his body gets drowned, but there's a chance to resurrect him somehow or something like that, right? It's almost a little anticlimactic to rescue King Hecaton and then have the giant take over, essentially, the final assault on the dragon. My party has spent plenty of time adventuring with Jorgen the Frost Giant, so I don't feel like they need another giant to kind of step in and forge a path ahead, right? So I think this upcoming fight where they try to rescue King Hecaton, I don't think it needs to be a fully realized rescue mission for it to feel like, oh, this is a success. I think personally the pacing that I would like to follow is I would like to keep upping the stakes. And if Hecaton does not survive, then everything gets a little more desperate and the stakes get higher and higher for that final battle. Let's crank our tension and our drama all the way up to max if we can. So I think there's a couple... So I don't think that has to happen, right? But they need to figure out where he is, they need to go rescue him, and then they need to deal with the consequences. And that probably means, whatever the consequences are, whether they win or lose that battle, they're probably going back to Maelstrom. I don't know if they're doing that this session or they're doing that next session. But, you know, Maelstrom goes back and poses the exact same issue, where does Princess Sarissa just give them... Here's some men and some resources, go attack the dragon. Also, they have no information about where the dragon is, right? Who the dragon is, etc. And I don't like the idea, as posited in Chapter 12, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here, but I don't like the idea that, oh, okay, well now, now King Hecaton just does some hocus pocus in his scrying pool, and we know exactly where the dragon is. So I think we have an opportunity here to feed more information to the players in a little more organic way, right? So, but I find myself in the position where last time I was sort of bragging about, oh, we've got all this time to do all these plot points, and I got time to run this huge battle, and I got this time to do this big finale battle, and blah, 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 right? I don't feel like I have that opportunity now, given how much of the plot needs to be like chug unspooled, because I feel like for that last session, I want to spend maybe half an hour of talking through the setup and maybe give them half an hour to get a game plan together, and then the next 2 hours, you know, are doing the fight, doing the final boss battle. That's what I want my last session to be, which means I've got to spool a lot of plot thread out there. And unlike, you know, what I had indicated last week, I was like, oh, I'll just handle a lot of this over Facebook. I didn't do that. And it's getting a little late now, Tuesday afternoon, to kind of grunt, to fire that up. So I need to look at some of the shortcuts to success that I can use to help give them plot information, to help channel them or funnel their attention into the next place that the plot has to go. It sounds an awful lot like railroading, but really I feel it's a matter of when you're under the gun for time, like we are in an Adventurers League kind of situation here, that if you can do it in an organic way, a little railroading is forgivable. And also, if you tell the players on a metagame level, okay, here's the deal. We've got 2.5 hours left. So you do some investigation. You know, you explain to them, you can't just kind of tiptoe around the plot and kind of go willy-nilly wherever you want. I tried to explain that to them last session a little bit. They did not take the hint. So I need to be more explicit about it. But I generally find that players cut you some slack if you say, you know, guys, I want to try and keep things moving here, and in the interest of time, we'd normally play this out, but here's the thing. You have a conversation with so-and-so. They inform you of the following things. Now, you don't have to tell them, oh, they inform you that King Hecaton is entombed in a monolith in, you know, the middle of Bryn Shander, or whatever you've decided that wherever you want King Hecaton to be. But you can give them enough string of clues that by the time they put it all together, they go, oh, let's see, well, now that guy, we know that guy's in Bryn Shander. If he was spotted there, we know that obelisk is used for something. Honestly, the more I talk about this, the more I like this idea. You can feed them information, which they then put together, and it leads them to the next course of action, right? So I'm not saying just like wallop them, blams, like straight dead on right in the face with the clue bat, but I am saying maybe gives them some taps with the clue wand so that the light goes on and they go, let's go here. So, Jaybird, thanks for giving us a follow. What's up? General Fancy Pants? I said it wrong. All right. So let's talk about some different ways that we can do this. All right. I think what I want to get them to commit to on Facebook is like, it seems like your next course of action is to go to the Golden Goat. What are your cover identities? And confirm that that's what you're going to do, and then give me your cover identities, right? Because I assume they're going to use cover identities. So that's General Fancy Pants. Sure, that makes sense. Why not? All right. So I'm so used. I skip over the N. I just go girl in fancy pants. I just transpose that a little bit. I don't know. You can be a girl in fancy pants, and you can be a general of fancy pants. All right. So So I want to nail that down with them on Facebook. I don't have to necessarily get a ton of the other plot out, because some part of the problem is at this point in the whole thing, in the week, I don't think the rest of the party is like the actual players are going to be able to check in and keep up with everything that's going on. And that means I'm going to end up having two problems. One, I'm going to have to repeat a bunch of stuff that I've already established. And two, there's going to be players at the table who have already heard this stuff before, and it feels like they know more than the other players at the table, and that sets up sometimes a weird dynamic. Or it sets up an opportunity for them to just check out. And sometimes when I'm repeating stuff, I either repeat it differently or I add different information, and then now all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? The golden goat is like mostly magic users that hang out there, and I'm like, no, it's mostly necromancers who hang out there. Like I might embellish a piece of information the second time I say it, and they're not listening. They push it away. All right, General Fancy Pants. I apologize for not getting your gender right. All right. So what are some shortcuts to success that we can use, right? We sort of talked about this in a different, more roundabout way last prep session, right? So we talked about, you know what, I have that. Let's go back. No, I don't have the actual things popped up, do I? No, I don't. No, I don't. Let's see if I have that old 314. Spooling out threads. Well, we talked about it last week. All right. Oh well. So this is a similar list of things that you can use to help your players get some specific information, right? I'm trying to think of the best way I want to formulate this, because I don't want to say like give it away. Like your goal is not to, well, you know, let me back this up. I've sort of painted myself in the corner as a DM, and my goal is to get them into the quote-unquote rescue of King Hecaton this session. So it's got to move fast. I don't have a lot of time to dink around and do a bunch of investigation and go a bunch of places and introduce a bunch of NPCs and have them sit there and wonder about different things. So I need to make this obvious, but still make them feel like, oh, they're earning this information, right? So I want to get them to a specific result. We don't have time to sandbox this thing out and play a myriad world of possibilities. But I do have some different ways that I think I can get them to that result depending upon what they pursue, right? So let's talk about it in that respect, right? All right. So generally what I'm thinking about when I think about these shortcuts to success, and that's to get them to the next possible plot intersection, is I'm thinking about doing a fairly large, fairly intensive info dump. Right? I'm really talking about filling in gaps that they don't know, and if they don't start drawing conclusions that lead them to the right place, help channeling or introducing new bits of information that clarify and lead them to a more laser-focused idea of what their plan of action is, right? So there's a time for letting them kind of wander all over the map, and there's a time for kind of pointing them to that final showdown that the book has prepped. And I feel guilty about this because in my home game I would probably find, you know, I don't know, you know, it feels like railroading, and I'm like, God, that's a bad thing. It's not always a bad thing if they feel like they've earned it. And I know I've said that before, but it's really bothering me, right? To say I want to get them to this specific result. But there's a couple things. One, I'm out of time. My back is up against the wall. I'm out of time. Number two, it's time to like have that showcase encounter. Sometimes when you let the players kind of like run roughshod all over the game and meander around and things like that, the game not only loses a little bit of its sense of purpose, like, wait a minute, I don't remember, guys, what are we actually trying to do? Why did we even come to this temple? But number two, it loses the dramatic build of we're moving towards this showdown with the big bad guy, or we're moving towards the final level of the deepest part of the dungeon where we're going to find the holy torch of St. Lucius, which is the master artifact we need to go back and cure the village of the plague, or whatever it is. Like, keep in mind that I think it behooves you to not only think about the pacing of your story in terms of what has come before and whether that was a win or a loss for your players, but it also behooves you to think about, like, is the pacing of my story slow, fast? Am I building towards something? Right? So we talked about this before. It's like, are they on wins or losses? Is the game moving slow or fast? But finally, like, is there a dramatic lift happening? Is there a denouement happening? Are we letting them struggle so that we can, why would you let them struggle? It's just that they feel like they've earned that next piece of the puzzle more appropriately. Or you're just giving them a chance to decide their own fate, and then the story takes off again. All of those things are fine, but it's not just pacing in terms of, are we playing a slow game or a fast game? And it's not just how you've rewarded them in terms of, are they on a streak of wins or are they on a streak of losses? But those things combined form the dramatic arc of your campaign. Is action rising or is action falling? Right? So you look at those things together, and my goal with getting them to this next story point is to keep building the pacing, the rise in action, to keep pushing it up, right? To raise the stakes and build momentum into that final thing. So if that means we have to do a huge info dump and lead them to the next piece of the story that they can actually put their claws on and they understand, so be it. And that's another factor to consider in this type of scenario where your back is up against the wall and your players don't have a huge clue, is it's not fun for the players to sit there and wonder, God, I don't know, what do we do next? And that's really where we ended the session last session. They had some clues, but they did not have a strong idea of what to do or where to go next. Okay. Well, let's help that out. When players are faced with a mystery, if they don't have the inclination or their tools to deal with it, they can get frustrated and feel lost. When players are faced with a combat, a lot of times that can be a very gratifying situation because they know exactly what to do in that situation. I roll dice. I roll to attack. I cast a spell. I heal my buddy. Yes, it can feel like a very mechanical exercise, but it's also a key component of the game, and it has very specific, defined roles, and it has a very specific and defined outcome, and players know 95% of the time how to proceed and what sort of decisions are involved in executing a combat and executing well, right? So, if your players are not the type of players who enjoy pursuing a mystery, and I don't know that this group particularly is, there's a few players who enjoy that. There's a few players who just want to goof around, and there's a couple players who want to kill stuff and make money, right? Well, that means 2/3 of the group just wants to know where to go next. Sometimes railroading the party, quote unquote, is doing your party a favor. All right. There, that's my little DM philosophy rant. That puts a bow on that. Let's finally talk about some ways that we can do a big info dump and help our players kind of round out this investigation phase that they're struggling with a little bit. So, I largely am going to talk about this in terms of NPCs that you can introduce. And I want to encourage you, when your players are lost, to think of this as like that's your main avenue to turn to. Because number one, an NPC is literally the voice of the DM, right? You don't want to tip your hand that much, but an NPC knows as much as you want them to know. Okay? So if you want them to give away all of the secrets of the plot, that's your mouthpiece. You can have them do that in that role-playing session. They can volunteer information. What was the second thing? I mean, it's very efficient in terms of that aspect of interaction. You know, and number two, like NPCs are easy to introduce, they're easy to explain, and in terms of efficiency, they can be very self-contained. If you introduce pieces of evidence that the party has to put together, they might misinterpret those pieces of evidence, or they might not put them together in the right order, or they might not find all of the pieces of evidence that you think they're going to find, or whatever. But, you know, a series of letters or whatever does not have tone of voice, does not generally repeat itself, does not have a sort of emphasis on something, can't respond to their questions and follow up on something that's bothering, you know, that's bothering the party or the party is misinterpreted. You know, pieces of evidence is a great way to help your party gather clues and things like that. But unless the evidence like literally spells out what's going on, it's a very passive way of sharing that information, and it's very open to misinterpretation by the players. If, on the other hand, your players start talking to an NPC who, for whatever plausible reason, knows something about what they're talking about or they're involved in, that person can now like, oh, let me think about it. Oh, you know, I remember. It's weird. One of the monoliths that was near Bryn Shander got dug up and that got stolen. It got taken away by this cloud giant castle. Huh. Okay. There you go. But if the players follow up on that, you know, then if they follow up on it, you can dole more information out. If they don't follow up on it, you as the DM can volunteer information as the NPC. So it's a very flexible, plausible, and direct way of dumping info on your party. Okay? And I don't say that to dismiss all of the other stuff that we talked about last week. I think those techniques are great, but it's not as efficient and it's not as responsive as having them talk to an NPC, find somebody who knows something that's going on. And that way you can have one scene with one person rather than having an investigation scene that leads you into 3 or 4 or 5 different scenes. So who are some NPCs that we can use to help our players find their way through the woods, so to speak? So there's a couple different kind of types that I want to review with you guys. And if you have additions to this list, I'm all ears. I'm happy to hear them. But you have a couple people. You have the guilty confessor. Okay. They track down some agent of the plot and they fight that guy and they capture him, or he says, tell you what, let me live, I'll tell you what's going on. Introduces the moral quandary that they probably will kill that guy anyway if I know 80% of Dungeons & Dragons players, but that's a whole different issue. But you can have the guilty confessor, someone who's involved in the plot directly, who decides to cut a deal with their captors and can spill their guts, right? Don't kill me. Just let me go and I'll let you know what I know. You know, don't turn me over to the authorities or don't have me executed, whatever it is. I will spill the beans on these guys. My loyalty is to myself. That's a classic. Secondly, you can have what I call the traitor to his cause, right? Somebody who's involved in the plot and knows what's going on, but it has gone over the edge for them. It's too much. They don't like who's involved, what they're doing, what the final plan is. They were maybe not keen on it at first, or maybe they were keen on it at first, and then they've seen where it goes, or there's been a cost attached to it. They've lost a friend, they've lost a lover, they've been, you know, mistreated by the main villain, by their boss or whatever, that they somehow come to the party, come to the authorities, they somehow surface and say, all right, I know it doesn't look good that I was involved in this, but I need to tell you what's going on because bad things are about to happen and I can't have this on my conscience anymore, right? So that's kind of the traitor to his cause. Although honestly, you know, you look at the other one, the guilty confessor, it's maybe the names are a little, you know, misaligned because it's the person with a guilty conscience. Right? Or they're a traitor for whatever, you know, for whatever reason. So that's someone that you can introduce. As I said earlier, this is sort of a side note. You can have an incriminating piece of correspondence or a couple pieces of correspondence. So the classic thing would be, you know, the letter that spells out the plan in minute detail. Maybe it's a map of how the villain is planning to break into the wizard's tower that holds the holy chalice of St. Ernestine or whatever it is, right? Oh, okay, well, they're going to attack at night. It looks like this is happening tomorrow. Guys, we got to go stop it. Call to action, perfect, great. Go, you know how to intercept them, whatever, right? So I would encourage you, if you are planning to use the incriminating piece of correspondence, if that's a journal entry or a sales transaction or whatever it is, if you're trying to help the party find their way out of the woods of the plot here, you need to try and make that as explicit as possible because as I pointed out earlier, there's no, if you're going to do it as an actual handout, there's no follow-up that follows up on questions that arise, and there's no, there's no follow-up correspondence that also corrects misinterpretations that they might have as a result of this correspondence. So that's the thing. James V. points out that the traitor to the cause could be someone who is not necessarily guilty, but has been shortchanged or lied to by the cause and wants to get back at whatever the cause is by telling the authorities everything. So they're motivated by vengeance and not guilt, which is also a very, you know, valuable point. So they want to, you know, they're mad at the boss. They want to, you know, another way to look at that is they maybe want the boss taken out so that they can advance with their own agenda, their own aims, or advance their own position within an organization, right? That's a classic mafia type of thing. You know, I go rat out on him, he gets taken out, and then I become whatever. So that's also a good point. So you can use an incriminating piece of correspondence, a map, a journal, a letter, you know, a receipt, etc. All of those things could potentially be loaded with enough information that they can really, you know, dump into, oh, okay, well, this helps us understand what's going on. But I don't really recommend it. It's very obvious. It feels very heavy-handed. And you have to be so explicit with these things if you want to avoid misinterpretation that you have to be careful with them. Another NPC personality type that you can introduce is someone that I call the surprise witness. Oh, you know what? The baker who lives across the street from the mansion was out on vacation and just came back and informed us that a couple months ago he saw some strange things happening at, you know, at the mastermind's lair here. And he saw this person come and go, and that was followed by this person, and then he heard some sort of strange humming or down ritual, like all of that stuff, right? So you can have the surprise witness. This is a classic mystery or legal procedural, you know, story trope of it turns out that someone saw it. So you can have them pop up and drop information. gets a little bit tickly because sometimes they're not as, because they're only tangentially involved in what's going on. It's hard to justify, like, how would he know that that wagon was filled with runes, you know, with gold ingots that are engraved with this particular rune? How would he know that? Oh, one fell off the wagon and he got a look at it while he was staring out the window. Really? He read the runes all the way across the street? No, he did some roof maintenance for the guy, and the guy tried to pay him in gold ingots with runes. He saw, you know, you can work at that pretty hard. But it is a plausible way to bring together disparate pieces of the plot that the players otherwise are having a hard time making connections to. There's two types that kind of like are flip sides of each other, and these are the final two things I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to move on to my next topics here. There's the wizened mentor. This is also a classic, where a boss or a mentor figure or whatever it is, whoever it is, somebody who has access to, who's maybe like a little smarter than the party and maybe has access to a few more resources than the party does, hears their story and then starts drawing conclusions. Well, wait a minute now, if this is this, and you found this letter, looks at it, okay, well, who's this yellow merchant fellow? Do you have any idea? I've heard of a guy who lives in Neverwinter who goes by the name of the Yellow Merchant. He, in fact, was known to employ gargoyles. He was, you know, his name was, you know, so you can have sort of what I would call a Sherlock Holmes type of character, right? The mastermind who helps them do the deduction and pull it all together. This, again, is very heavy-handed and can feel very much like it's just the DM cocking off in front of the party and feeding his plot line. And haha, look at this. Don't you guys get it? Because this is how it all fits together. You idiots couldn't piece it together. So I'm going to walk you, I'm literally going to walk through it in front of you and go, do you get it? Do you get it? Do you get it? It's not bad. You know, it's not the worst way of going about things, but you have to be careful with it. You know, you have to be careful with making that. You can always have that character ask some questions or not be sure about some things, or ask a piece of, you know, well, what do you get? Who do you think this yellow merchant fellow is? Oh, well, we met a guy in Triboar who had gargoyles watching his mansion. He lived there. Da, da, da. Oh, really? You know what? Yeah, that does make sense. Oh, let me ask about that guy. Oh, he was recently seen in Waterdeep. Oh, he's got a lot of money all of a sudden. Da, 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 da. Like, okay, it all fucking makes sense. Dropped an F-bomb. Oops. So if you use that character with the proper touch, it's not as onerous as, you know, an Agatha Christie thing where, you know, the master detective comes in the final chapter and reveals a bunch of crap that the reader didn't know and pieces it all together and puts a bow on it and goes, and that's how we know who the murderer is. So, keep that in mind. The flip side of this character is what I would call the Mr. Watson stereotype, right? So, the guy who's informed enough to be able to ask questions. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, so, wait a minute, now it mentions this yellow merchant, who do you think that is? Like I said, it's sort of like the example that I just gave, except you just keep asking questions, and every once in a while you gently guide the characters to make some conclusions when they've sort of pieced some things together, but they haven't explicitly stated it. Oh, okay. So you think the Kraken Society is involved in the Golden Goat? How? What do you want to? How do you plan to? You know, that sort of stuff. So the naive questioner asks a bunch of questions and helps the party arrive at that conclusion. That can be a little tricky to pull off too, but it is less in your face. It's all a matter of positioning, right? It's less in your face as the Sherlock Holmes kind of wizened mentor type of character. And then the advantage to the wizened mentor is the players assume that there's dudes out there who are 20th level who just know stuff, period. They just know stuff, right? So if you go and talk to Kelvin Blackstaff Aronson about the Kraken Society, he's going to be able to go, oh yeah, they're involved here, here, X, Y, Z. He just knows, and the players are going to, yeah, it makes sense. He's Kelvin Blackstaff, man. He knows everything. I can't even believe we're talking to this guy. So there's some plausibility there. It's just a matter of presentation. It can be you can have problems with the naive questioner too, where it just feels like an exercise in futility, where you keep asking the players questions and they keep coming up with the wrong answers. And they get frustrated because it feels like the DM is making them look stupid because they don't know what the answer is. So those are our NPC shortcuts to success, to helping find our players through an investigation phase that they're not sure where to tackle it next, who the prime suspects are, exactly what's happening, where the information that they have is just a little too sparse for them to really piece it together into a coherent plot line or logical sequence that they can then act on, right? I can't remember if Blackstaff is dead or not. A lot of my Forgotten Realms knowledge comes from the original boxed set. I'm also guilty of not reading a ton of Forgotten Realms fiction. I'm not a great reader to begin with, but for whatever reason, I don't know, I always feel like I want to create my own adventures in the realms, and I want to know who's out there, but I don't want to read a book about somebody else's adventures in the realms. I don't know. It feels... to me, just honestly, this is the way I feel about it. It's a little bit like watching somebody else play with your action figures in your toy box. Yeah, but I don't... I want to... But... Okay, no, I'm glad you're having fun. That's that. So, trust me, I am not canonically informed on whether Kelvin Blackstaff is alive or dead. That's not me. All right, we've got a little bit of time here. I got some time here. I can go probably 10 or 15 minutes over. So that's that. Good news for everybody involved. All right, so cast of characters. Here's something that I want you to think about. Here's something that's important for two reasons, right? Your cast of characters. I want you to think about everyone you have introduced during the course of the campaign, or at least during the course of this adventure. And there's two reasons for this. Number one, in my shortcuts to success, I need to think about people that the party already knows. Okay? When I look at filling the role of the guilty confessor, the traitor to his cause, the incriminating not the incriminating correspondence, but the surprise witness, the wizened mentor, the naive questioner, if I'm going to plug one of these roles into my plot line, it behooves me to use someone the players already know. I don't have to introduce a whole new NPC. I mean, obviously, you can do that with a surprise witness, and it makes sense, right? But if I have the wizened mentor, it's far more believable and rewarding for Charlton Helmstar to pull them into his office and go, you guys are the most sorry bunch of Zents I have ever seen in my life. I can't believe you can't wiggle out the details of a classic scam like extortion, da 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 da, and pull that sort of stuff together, right? So somebody that they've interacted with makes your campaign world feel whole and complete, and it rewards them for having paid attention. They know how to relate to that person. It makes sense that they're having a meeting with this person, that they're interacting with them. They have a context for who that person is. Even if they're shedding new light, new information on something that hasn't been considered before. Even if they're acting as a surprise witness. In those cases, all you have to do is be able to come up with a plausible reason why they didn't tell the party that before. And typically, it's because the party didn't know information that actually like tripped them off, that prompted them to share this with them. Oh, you're looking for a guy named the Yellow Merchant who travels with gargoyles? I saw a guy like that just on Thursday over at the Golden Goat, and I saw him down at the docks for some reason. Terrific! Cheltenham Stars, saved the day. But so reason number one you want to think about your cast of characters is you can reintegrate them into your plot. Now, this whole thing with the Yellow Merchant, that was just a name that I put in one of the letters that they found. And the thing about the gargoyles was something that I picked up on something else, right? I didn't even tie this back to the fact that there's a wizard in Triboar who uses gargoyles, and the party remembers that. They remember that wizard being way out of their league. This is perfect. Great. That guy is now the Yellow Merchant. I don't have to adjust my plot. And even if I did, it's far more rewarding for that guy to be someone that they could have interacted with. Oh man, what if we had gone to this? If we kill that guy, we get his house. Yes! So think back on your cast of characters and use this as a way to help your party find their way out of the plot forest. That's one thing, okay? Reincorporating people that they've already met. And it helps if it's somebody that's notable, but otherwise, this far along, it's okay if they're not somebody that the party fully remembers, as long as they remember, oh yeah, there was that guy who wore the magenta cloak. We didn't really talk to him, did we? Maybe that's why he was along with that thing or whatever. But it's a lot of work to introduce a whole new NPC and to give the party a reason to trust, or at least give the party a context for interacting with that new NPC. If you can pull someone from the backlog of people that you introduced, now at least they have a running head start at it. You've given yourself some groundwork. You've given yourself some pieces to work with, some things that you can weave together that'll make sense for the party. You've given them some buy-in. The other reason I want you to think about the cast of characters is it's the second to last session. This is our final option for highlighting people that we want to highlight. Either give, shining a spotlight on their role as the villain, giving them the opportunity to interact with the party as an asset or a fun role-playing experience, somebody who was just cool to have in the game. Essentially, you can think about this as like, really, since you don't get a curtain call, or you might not build a curtain call into it, this is your last chance to like, oh, remember that guy? Oh yeah, they're here for you, dude. They stopped by, they've heard what's going on. You reach out to them and they come back, or whatever it is. But the important point is, you've assembled this array of characters over the course of 24 sessions. It's just plain good technique to do some callbacks to the highlights that you've encountered along the way. I'm not saying that you have to do it and that you should intrude or slow down the storyline in order to make that happen. I am saying it's an opportunity for you to make that sort of experience happen. And your players will appreciate that person showing up, right? So think back on your cast of characters and think about who or why you might want to reincorporate them or have them resurface in these final 2 sessions of the game. I can tell you right now that I'm planning to bring back Kella Darkhope, who is the Zentrum agent that they encountered way back in Chapter 1 in Nightstone. Okay? She's not going to play a major role, but everybody in the party is going to be like, oh yeah, I remember her. Hey, didn't you have the hots for her? Like, oh, what's she been up to? I don't need to give a big story for that. It would be nice to have a little one. But rather than say, you commandeer a random caravan or a random ship or whatever it is, it's far more interesting to say, Kella Darkhope shows up with a caravan, or she's the head of the ship, or whatever. Great! Well played. So look back on your cast of characters as you're coming into this final stretch of the adventure and see if there's anybody that's worth revisiting, kind of spotlighting, highlighting, you know, or maybe they've become a villain too, right? Obviously, like I did that with Marcus Gove, although he wasn't that far back, right? But this yellow merchant guy, this magic user who lived in the house in Triboar, he's from way back. The players remembered him. Great! Pull it in, pull him in. That's an awesome hook. If you love it, I love it. Let's make it work. There's no reason not to. So, that's another reason to look at your cast of characters is you've done all of this work over literally like 6 months of dropping in these interesting characters, having little moments with the players. You have one last chance to remind them of those little moments in an organic way without doing like, you know, curtain call montage at the end, da-da-da-da. All right, so that's that. I'm going to talk about one last topic, and then I will wrap it up for the day. And I want to talk about a little paranoia. So I'm going to take a little drink here, and we're going to discuss the paranoia game. If you look at the videos on our channel, let me see if I can pull up the... Let me pull up the specific link to it, and I'll drop it in the chat here. That's not it. Yeah. All right. So this is going away. So if you did not watch the Paranoia game, that is the... Oh, Farquaad! Quick on the draw. Thank you, sir. That is the link to the Paranoia game that we played this weekend. The first hour is largely like getting the characters together and get them on the mission briefing. If you want to skip it, you can skip it if you are curious. It is a classic. It is a Paranoia classic to take an hour and a half to kind of get out of the room. So keep that in mind, right? Keep that in mind that oftentimes in Paranoia, there's a lot of everyone accuses everyone else of being a traitor, and there's a lot of inter-party fighting. That's a normal part of the game. But there's a couple things about Paranoia that I want to discuss that occurred to me as I was running the game. And for those of you who are Patreon backers, there is in the Patreon general folder specifically for you guys a folder called, I think it's called Paranoia One Shot. Maybe I called it Wizzy World. I can't remember exactly. The point being that it has a it has all of the characters, all of the handouts, and the notes on Wizzy World that I use to run the game, as well as the quirk deck that I put together of the mutations and whatnot when the radiation hazard went off. So you actually have all of my material from this weekend's game. But here's the main thing that I wanted to address, which is combat in Paranoia is incredibly deadly, right? There are no hit points. There are 4 different conditions. You are stunned, wounded, incapacitated, healthy, or dead. So technically there's 5 conditions, but I don't know. You can either discount healthy or dead. I don't care which one. Neither one really matters, right? But in terms of shades of gray along that spectrum, it's stunned, incapacitated. Stunned, wounded, incapacitated. That's it. Likewise, when players attack, they don't do points of damage. Their weapon either misses, stuns, wounds, incapacitates the foe, or kills them. That's it. Just straight up on that spectrum. Bam, 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 bam. Okay? There's no let's roll a bunch of d6s. Da, 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 da. Now, why is that important? Here's what I found was that combat in Paranoia runs incredibly quickly. It's not super high stakes because if you get killed, another clone just comes along in a few minutes and that's it. Everything's fine. But it's incredibly deadly, incredibly fast. Encounters resolve very quickly. I want to shoot that guy. All right. He can maybe take one more hit. He's dead. Here was my insight as I was running the game, which meant because combat was so fast, no, you didn't get to do a lot of cool combat moves and do stuff that had a big flourish or whatever, and you couldn't pull off a bunch of slick combat moves for the most part. Although, you know, when somebody scores a kill right off the bat, you can certainly describe that in a cool way. But that means that combat is not the main focus of the game. Combat is sort of this little jousting match that you engage in, but it's a byproduct of everything else, which is largely exploring and misinterpreting events as you discover things that you discover, right? So Paranoia far more is a game about role-playing between the players. You're a traitor. No, how dare you accuse me? You know, you've got different security levels. You know, you've got different roles on the team. Somebody could be the loyalty officer. And then finally, you've got secret societies where everybody's got not only their... You've also got their job. I'm in internal security. I'm... you know, in management, I'm in power services, whatever it is. And then on top of it, they got a secret society that may be something completely different. I'm for purebred humans. I hate mutants. I'm against the computer. I think the computer, artificial intelligence, is an abomination against God, etc. So you have all of these different layers, role-playing hooks that you can play off of. The fighting part of it really has very little to do. But what that does is, number one, it changes the focus of the game. It's not about killing monsters and taking their stuff. Okay, that's fine. It's a different game. It may not necessarily intersect with D&D in quite the same way. It has a completely different focus. That's fine. More importantly, I found I could explore more of the story because combat was so cut and dried and quick and to the point. So I could give them more places to go. I could introduce more NPCs if I chose to do so. I could have a moment where we do a little detour into whatever. You know, somebody on Twitter the other day made the comment that, like, if I run a combat in a very slick system, I end up having to make up more. I think it was like about Numenera, where like combat was like essentially sort of so streamlined that you end up having to make up a lot more, like to fill a lot more of your session with other stuff. I would argue that can be an interesting change of pace, right? That's an interesting opportunity to go and explore and have more plot or more discovery or more social interaction, to really focus on the other 2 or 3 pillars of the role-playing game experience that don't revolve around combat. So I'm not saying that this is good or bad. I guess, you know, for somebody who's an old school D&D player and for whom so much of the game has revolved around killing monsters and taking their stuff. And, you know, I'm planning 2 major set-piece combats for the end of this campaign. But it was also illuminating for me to go, yeah, that combat's over, let's just move on. And so rather than seeing it as an absence, that like, oh no, like it's a prompt for anxiety, how do I fill this time? It's an opportunity to do more, to get more out there, to explore more, to RP more, whatever it is. So that was something that I learned from running our Paranoia game. I think if you watch that session, you'll see some other interesting things going on. And Paranoia is just a fun, classic game. I would got to give big ups to James V for coming up with a couple of the encounters. He came up with the weird guys on the meat wagon that popped up. So that was certainly something that was a bizarre and interesting interaction for the party, as well as a couple of the mutations. So I don't know what else I want to say about Paranoia. I do think there's some interesting. It's got a really interesting feel in terms of how bureaucratic it is and how, I don't want to say like bureaucratic. Did I just say bureaucratic? I guess I don't want to say authoritarian. Like there's a hierarchy, like there's somebody in charge. When we did the team roles, like you're the team leader, you're the loyalty officer, you're security, you're the comms person, you're the equipment guy, you're the hygiene officer, right? And then scrambling those roles was interesting to watch them move around and stuff. So there was definitely like a hierarchy of players who had power over other players. That was interesting. I don't know if that would play as well in a D&D game where death is an actual inconvenience as opposed to just a temporary setback. So, I would encourage you to go and watch that game and take a page, just take some notes on how it played out, and you know, maybe it will give you some insight into how you could be DMing differently. I would also encourage you to go and watch the Fiasco game that we played, because that was a really interesting game of shifting alliances, players having very strong, definite things that they wanted or needed, double crosses coming out, you know, struggles for friendship and loyalty. It was a really, I thought it was a really touching and gripping exercise in plot and storytelling and characterization. So I would say it was a very, very solid example of what Fiasco can be if you are looking for how to run it, how to play it, etc. So we had some really, I want to thank everybody who was involved in the marathon this weekend. We had a great time. I was really, really, you know, happy and gratified at the game I ran and as well as the game that I played in. And I was really, you know, humbled by everyone who donated to us. So I appreciate your, I appreciate all of your views. We pulled in a ton of new followers, and I also appreciate all of your contributions, whether it was time modding, spent modding, or actual money contributed to the show. So I'm going to wrap it up at this point. It's 10 after 3. We've gone a little bit over our hour. So You can catch everything on the Saving Throw Marathon on our Twitch channel, so go check that out at twitch.tv/savingthrowshow. Let's take a look at what's coming up the rest of the week, shall we? So, later tonight, Mr. David Crennan is giving a Kickstarter preview of Hexplore It. He's got a group of guests coming in playing this game that's now on Kickstarter. Called Hexplore It. That's all I know about it. I wish I could tell you more. Tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, it is the season finale with GM Mace McDaniel of Barky's Brigade, our Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game. So it all comes crashing down. Will we murder Grob's character? I only say that because he's in the room. Maybe. We'll see. Grav, you are not biased. Fiasco was so good. So go check that out. Thursday at 2 o'clock, I will be back with Disorganized Play. By the way, on Wednesdays over on The Geek and the Sundry from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, I do a little thing called Dungeons & Dragons The Improvised Campaign with the talented improvisers of Bearded Men West. IGM, they are the heroes and the NPCs. I set the scene. They then go about destroying whatever sort of plot unfolds. And it's all based on your suggestions thrown out by people in the chat. So keep that crap up. You can tune into Geek and Sundry at 2 o'clock and catch me over there. If you've not watched this show before, it's really fun. So I encourage you to tune in and enjoy it. It's something that I do, and we're at a new time on Wednesdays. So we're trying to get our audience to kind of dial into where did these guys come from? Where did they go? All right. But on Thursday, I'm back at 2 o'clock for the recap of Disorganized Play to let you know how everything went. At 8 o'clock, David Crennan is back for another installment. I believe this is the second session of Never Tell Me the Odds, Edge of the Empire Star Wars game. They just started a new season, and I believe this is their second session. So Markia McCarty is in that game. I'm not on top of who all the cast is, but check that out. Friday night, are we really doing Call of Cthulhu Black Bag? I thought West just had a season finale. Apparently, maybe it's not the Vikings Black Bag anymore. I was prepping my game, so I checked in on the Vikings season finale, and it was too distracting. I had to get some stuff going, and it was too distracting to watch the chat and listen to the game, so I had to turn it off. Don't tell. Saturday, Dom Zook is having a Patreon backer-only chat with you guys, 10:30 in the morning. Tune in for that. 12:30 p.m., it's a brand new season with Mac Beauvais at the helm, Phoenix Dawn Command. So if you have not watched the game of... the game where it's actually one of your goals to die, I encourage you to check out Phoenix Dawn Command. It is by the talented Keith Baker, and that is what is going on Saturday. Sunday, we have our very special Maximum Miniatures show with Iron Tusk Painting. Tune in for 2 o'clock. I know if you watched my miniature painting Disorganized Paint that I did a couple weeks ago, I'm sure Iron Tusk is spinning in fury and rage at what a hack job I did converting Aquaman to this storm giant. I thought it turned out all right, but I'm sure that Iron Tusk would have done a far better job. So tune in for Sunday at 2 o'clock for that show and get some painting tips, and I believe you can also just bid on the minis. So Monday is the championship round, Season 4, the Tournament of Champions, a fight to the finish to determine who will be the overall Season 4 champion. So tune in next Monday for Monday Night Dungeon Fight. It will be an all-out slugfest, and I always try to turn up the dials a little bit to maximum mayhem in our season finale Tournament of Champions anytime we end a season of Monday Night Dungeon Fight. That is it for me, everybody. Hey, thanks so much for joining me. I want to thank our mods, Flockwad. I want to thank all of our regulars for tuning in. Christian Linky, James V, Double XG. I'm not giving you any big props. Well, no, I'm going to take that back. Double XG did a super Double GXD, did a super job of helping coordinate the marathon. So big props to Gaurav for being a trooper and being dedicated and giving Dom big help. I honestly worried about my game more than I worried about anything else, and although that I felt paid dividends, it also is a little self-indulgent of me to just let everybody else set up the room. So big ups to Gaurav for all of his hard work. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for me until next time. Let's dungeon! Yes! All right, I'm on a streak of 1. A streak of 1.